It's really good to see so many people here today. We're all mic'd up like Britney Spears, but we won't be doing any dancing.
Madonna.
And I think what I'd like to do is just introduce the panel, and then we're going to talk about Gibraltar's competitive advantages, and there'll be some time at the end for some questions. So if you have questions, please join in, but a little towards the end of the session. So first of all, let me just say welcome to Yvonne. Thank you very much for the last session. I think everyone sort of knows you now, so I don't have to say anything more.
Yeah.
Angelique Linares. Angelique is a chartered accountant. She has been with EY for many years, are very experienced in insurance and auditing insurance companies, intermediaries. She was part of the team that established EY in Gibraltar in 2013, and in 2018 she was appointed managing partner of EY. Mike Ellis. Mike is an insurance professional for over 30 years, been involved in insurance companies, MGAs and insurance brokers. He's the MD of Artex in Gibraltar and also the MD of Artex in Malta, recently appointed. And Mike is going to be talking a little bit later. I think you've only been in Gibraltar for just over a year, so it's going to be interesting to see how your perception of Gibraltar 16, 17 months ago was, and how that sort of changed today, having been here now for over a year.
Yeah.
Clive Dodds. Clive's also another chartered accountant. Clive worked in private practice from qualification until he retired in 2021, but he's been involved with Trinity Lane, which got its license in Malta in 2006, and he's been involved in that business all that time as a director, and since retiring has got more involved in the day-to-day. And Clive's going to be talking about that journey of redomiciliation from Malta to Gibraltar in 2020. So without further ado, let me just ask the first question we have for the panel, and I'm going to address that first of all to Mike. Mike, just tell us a little bit about, we say, in Gibraltar and the government certainly over recent years has often used the word vibrancy and that we have a vibrant insurance sector. So tell us a little bit more about, your impressions of how Gibraltar is vibrant, and what's the future? How can we bring in more businesses and
I'm not sure I've got the crystal ball to tell us what the future looks like. But as you say, Mike, I've only been here for 12 months, but I think today is an indicator of the vibrancy of the insurance market in Gibraltar. As Denise described, maybe like 8-9 months ago, I sat down with Denise and we sort of said, we'd really like to sponsor this event. We want to try and encourage more business to come into Gibraltar. We were hoping maybe 50 people turned up, and it's just amazing to see how interested people are in Gibraltar as a financial services sector. And it's great to be able to sort of be here today. Nigel mentioned 30% of UK motor business is written in Gibraltar. We mustn't forget that actually 30% of intermediated travel in the UK is done through Gibraltar. We've got a burgeoning pet insurance sector. At Artex, we've got clients that do a myriad of things: gadget insurance, property, casualty, legal expenses, all sorts of stuff. So from my perspective, looking from the outside before I came, Gibraltar's a motor market. It's not. I think we need to stop talking in that kind of vein, because we are already more diverse than that. And to attract in sort of new business, I think that's something that we should do externally, is actually say how much expertise and skill we've got in a variety of areas. So I think you're all a testament to how vibrant the community is. And I know there are lots of people that haven't been able to make it today from the UK. So if you're watching later on YouTube or whatever Denise is going to do with this kind of stuff, there are going to be some really interesting, important messages I think that you're going to hear today.
So
I think from my perspective, coming from the UK, so 32 years in the UK, dealing with FCA, etc. Radical difference here. GFSC, you can go and visit them. I can walk to their offices in 10 minutes. It's brilliant. You can go and meet the same people on a regular basis. At the FCA, you're very lucky to be able to actually have a nominated individual for your company and speak to the same person on a regular basis. Here, you get that all the time. And I think that helps that relationship between insurance entities and the regulator. Yvonne, you mentioned about sort of some of the challenges maybe on things like speed to market. I think that is something that we do need to work on. Let's not shy away from the fact that if you're going to attract new business, and it's going to be dynamic business, insurtech, startups. They want to move quickly. Other jurisdictions are quicker than us at the moment, and I think that's something that we definitely need to work on. But having somebody like Nigel moving from his legal position, working in insurance, into the ministry, again, I think that's a major bonus for us, and we need to use Nigel's enthusiasm and energy to create new opportunities. So things like the dual captive regime that he mentioned is an exciting innovation. So I see it as being vibrant. I think there are some challenges which people have already talked about. Will be interesting to hear from Monica and Christian later as well about the regulator.
Thank you. Maybe just taking this a little bit further, Angelique, have you got anything that you'd like to add in terms of maybe what the future holds and how we can maybe attract? We know that it's been sort of publicly stated in recent months that there's a number of, or at least one, a life insurance application, which is very different from the life insurance companies we have at the moment, and they're relatively small entities compared to other jurisdictions. So, what do you think? Is there a possibility of really, and the Minister again spoke about diversification. So where do you see that in terms of the conversations you have with prospective clients?
I think life is one of the things, the life annuity business is something we've been working on, and I think one of the advantages we have is our ability to adapt and be flexible. And one of the things that attracts that type of business is the PCC legislation that we have here, for which there are other jurisdictions, but the UK doesn't have. So that particular aspect of the legislation is a great tool that we have to work on. I think the captive regime is great to be looking at, because we did have lots of captives back in the day before Solvency II, and I think it's great to be booming back into that space. And we have a lot of professionals who have a lot of experience in that industry. So I think one of the things we have to our advantage is that ability to innovate and be flexible, and that access to the regulator allows us to move forward and to communicate what the new businesses that are coming and need. So I think that's an advantage.
Thank you. And Yvonne, I know you sit on the board of an MGA, and I think there's MGAs can be future. They can evolve into insurance companies in the future.
Yeah.
But what do you think in terms of what do we need to do to attract more MGAs to Gibraltar? As I think you mentioned earlier, that we've made some changes to our legislation to make that easier. But what do you think we need if we really want to push and to get sort of more of those MGAs and say to them, look, these are the compelling reasons that insurance companies are set up here, but we think they're equally compelling for MGAs. So what do we need to do?
I think for MGAs, it starts off always on capital. And MGAs, you only require 4% of the gross written premium of that year. But I think that's still not low enough. I think we need, the capitalization to go lower. And Gibraltar is flexible. I think the turnover, in statute, they say it takes 3 months to authorize an MGA. But is it really 3 months? That's the question. We need the regulator to be on board on this, because the statute might say 3 months, but in reality, it takes longer. So I suppose the regulator's argument has always been the quality of the application. So it is very important when an applicant comes, especially to us service providers, the lawyers, the accountants, and the insurance managers, that they look at the application and to make sure that the application is of certain quality, and not to just say, okay, we'll do this, and then send it in. And of course, the regulators is going to turn around and say, this is not good enough. So they come back with more questions. So we have to be mindful about that. But, I still feel there's still room to improve in respect of the turnaround period. But, service providers like us, we are there. We're there to help. We're there to actually look through those applications. MGAs, it's great to come. The problem with MGAs as well, they cannot find capacity. So that's another, sort of like when we started looking into the MGA market, there were so many inquiries. And then it always falls through because they can't find capacity. They can't find insurers. And, so what's the point, right?
Well, I suppose in a way that, as Mike was saying earlier, if the insurance sector, the insurance company sector becomes more diversified, then there's the potential for some of those carriers, not necessarily, but to provide some capacity to new MGAs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, to add to what you're saying about the application process, I think one of the good innovations that we've seen from the regulator, and it only came in on the 1st of January, is like the staged application process, but the pre-application conversation to have with the regulator. So you can very quickly go, actually, that one's just not going to get through. So you're not going to go through the whole rigmarole of putting together all the documentation you need for a full application. You have that conversation very early to say that business plan and that model is just not going to work, or you're not going to be successful in getting your capital, etc. So, especially from the regulator's point of view, they can cut out a lot of the stuff that was probably bogging them down, taking up loads of resource. Get that out early and focus our attention. And again, from the advisor's point of view, that's our job, isn't it, as well, to help clients to go, actually, that's not going to work. And that's where our expertise comes in.
I suppose that stands Gibraltar in a unique position because we can have a pre-application meetings with our regulators. I think a lot of jurisdictions do not allow that. So, and because we're small, we are able, and they're easily accessible as well. And they're, willing to sort of listen. So that's probably a plus for Gibraltar. And I'm sure, Clive, you will have,
Well, we certainly did have a pre-meeting. Obviously, we weren't a setup, we were a read-on. But the pre-meeting made a lot of difference to us, and it was very much more helpful for us to know what direction we were going in. We obviously easier because we had all the financial information because we've been trading for 14 years. Yes. But the meeting we had with them probably 18 months before we moved made the job a lot easier for all of us.
Thank you. We're going to come back to Clive in a little bit more detail. So I think the second question is for Yvonne, and that's in terms of sort of, you've touched on some of the things, regulation and the GAR, but maybe could you just give us a little bit more detail in terms of where Gibraltar regulation sits with the UK and what and the GAR. What does the future hold? Do you think in terms of? I mean, are we going to be sort of in a straitjacket, or have we still got the opportunity to be innovative and entrepreneurial and to keep a distinct identity?
That is why I have the grey clouds on the rock and the lighter part of the rock. Yeah, it is a good question. We are actually now working towards aligning our rules with that of the UK. And obviously, it is very important that we align our rules because the consumer is in the UK. So it makes sense that we comply with their rules. But the question is, will we be straitjacketed? To a large extent, yes. Unless we do not deal with the UK market. If we deal I think that's the point that Nigel is trying to make, to move away and be part of the rest of the world. Let's trade with the rest of the world. But the UK market is really, really important to Gibraltar. Like I say, 90% of our insurers write business in the UK. And there'll be rules coming through with FCA, with the PRA. I mean, look, we already, consumer duty, which came into effect last summer, we are now putting it into place. But all the firms are already ready because they write in the UK and they already put all their system in place to comply with consumer duty. Gibraltar will now start to put that for the rest of the financial services sector because that was only applicable. We know about consumer duty because we are insurance writing the products in the UK, but now it's cutting across the board. All the other financial sectors will now have to comply with consumer duties. And operational resilience, all this are what we're doing. Regulator individuals, which is the same as the senior managers certification regime in the UK. So we are putting things to make sure that we are able to get GAR. I think Kerry is working so hard, to make sure that we comply if we want the UK market.
Yeah, thank you. And Angelique, we've spoken already this morning about sort of the unique aspects of Gibraltar, sort of access to the regulator, and then speed to market and the new regime. But so in that sense, do you think that we can still manage to retain our identity whilst we have a unique position because Gibraltar is the only jurisdiction there's no other third country, no other Crown dependency, no other British overseas territory that has this unique passporting right into the UK. So we need to cherish that, and it's brought huge success and reward for Gibraltar. But how do we sort of maintain the requirements of that and yet keep our own identity and look for innovation and bring in new businesses?
Well, I think we've been very successful in bringing in business over the years. I think as Yvonne covered in her keynote speech, the industry has changed significantly over the last 20 years that we've been working in it. I mean, I think what brought companies to Gibraltar 20 years ago, or the landscape has changed, and so what may have brought companies to Gibraltar 20 years ago isn't what will bring them in now. I mean, we've had the Income Tax Act in 2010. That was big. We had Brexit, Solvency II. I mean, I think those are the three big things that have hit us over the last 20 years, and companies have adapted, and it's interesting to see how many of them we still have. So there are other reasons why. So it's not just for tax. It wasn't just the low capital, and it wasn't just the access to Europe that was bringing them. There were other things. And we have to nurture those other things that have brought companies to Gibraltar. And there are lots of other things, cost benefits, tax. I mean, there are still tax benefits, less than they were yesterday, but yeah, tax benefits still. And there's the access to the professionals that are here with the knowledge. We still have the what we feel is proportionate regulation in the current economic environment, the world economic environment, which is what we were moving towards that with taxation, everything else that's happening around the world. So I think that there are lots of bits that are advantageous to us, and we have to work to our advantage in that respect. So work with the regulator, speed to market, all those other things that are important for clients. I really feel, though, that the difference is that clients do want to be in a well-regulated market. It's important to their reputation, and I think that everything is moving in that direction so we can have a well-rounded product. If that makes sense.
Yes. I mean, I personally believe that providing that we, comply with the GAR and the spirit in which it's been negotiated, that Gibraltar can keep a very vibrant insurance sector. So, in that sense, Mike, as an insurance manager, are you still seeing, have you got a decent pipeline of prospective clients? I mean, maybe they would all come here and maybe you won't all of them, but is your business, is it busy at the moment in the sense of new applications and interest in looking at Gibraltar as a potential home for new insurance businesses? And I mean that both intermediaries and insurance companies.
Yeah, so without giving anything away confidentially, then yes, absolutely. And I think we've done a lot of work over the last sort of 12 months in trying to engage with more people in the UK to demonstrate to them the attractiveness of Gibraltar. But not only that, we've got people coming towards us, not even from the UK, from other territories, saying, we want to be in Gibraltar. We understand why it's attractive. So yes, we've very much got a healthy pipeline. And just picking up on something that Yvonne was saying around sort of regulation and obviously we need to be a well-regulated market. I think one of the key differentiators between us and actually being in the UK would be what Kerry Blight would say is we need equivalent of outcomes. So we're not necessarily applying exactly the same rules, but it's the same outcomes. Which then means that if you're a smaller business, more dynamic, etc., maybe the rules can be slightly different. The outcome needs to be the same, but the implementation of that can be different as well. So I think that's a key differentiator, and that's why I think some people are like looking at Gibraltar in a different way in the past, where maybe it was only to do with financial benefits. Yeah.
And Clive, anything to add on?
Not really in that department. That's not my area of expertise, I have to be honest.
So I think actually, I mean...
Very few areas of expertise, but I'm even less in that area.
Actually, Mike, those last comments sort of segues very well into the next question. Angelique, in terms of tell us a little bit more, whilst maintaining those outcomes, what are the sort of main operating differences between Gibraltar and the UK
You mean the weather? Apart from the weather. Operationally, I think the biggest differences probably clients find here is the access to the regulator. I think that is probably top of the list of things that they find is different here, and I think you've mentioned that already, but that is a key differentiator for them. Is that interaction that they can have on a more regular basis, and the speed of speed to market. I think it's something that, I mean, Yvonne just brought up, is it's important that we work on that to make sure that that interaction and that speed continues to be the case here. Obviously, reputation for clients is very important, and being somewhere where they feel there is a strong regulatory environment is important too. So we see that with clients. I think one of the things that we also have here, especially for startups, is we have the insurance manager model, and we haven't talked about that. And so I don't want to steal your thunder, but that is particularly good for incubating startups, is having that already infrastructure in place, which allows expertise to be applied, because when you're moving into setting up an insurance company, there is a lot of intricacies in there, and I think the insurance manager model works really well for startups. So, clients came for a reason, and they've stayed for other reasons, apart from the costs and reduce costs, reduce tax, etc., etc.
And do people say that if as a startup or as someone that wants to maybe move from being an MGA to a full stack insurer, does the fact that we have just one regulator, whereas for an insurance company in the UK you've got two regulators to deal with, how important do you think that is in terms of hopefully a more simplified business model, and in terms of your contacts with the regulator?
I feel that those are the things that make people stay. Is that simpler model and the complexity of what they have to deal with in the UK, and I'm sure Mike can add to that as well. Yeah.
Yes, certainly my experience from UK into Gibraltar is the access to the regulator, and although you might switch teams within the regulator if you're moving from MGA to insurer, there's a consistency of culture and how you interact with them as well, which is really helpful. Yeah.
In our 14 years in Malta, I never met the regulator.
Really?
Not once.
And now you can't get away from that.
No, yeah, that's true.
I mean, was that? Do you think that was a something that happened for most of your contemporaries?
At the time, it didn't really worry me, but now that we have access to the regulator, it makes life a lot easier. Definitely, because you know what the regulator wants you to do, and more importantly, you don't give them any surprises, because you can go and tell them what's going on a quarterly basis. But as I said, I never met the regulator, even when we were setting up the business in Malta.
Wow. Even
though I was the financial director.
And no sort of so no annual sort of meetings or
no,
just
no 10-yearly meetings, let alone annually.
Okay. Maybe just we've talked about it in terms of the insurance manager. It's come up a number of times. So, Mike, so the next question is, tell us a little bit about what an insurance manager does, because we've got people who'll be looking at this after the event today on, as you said, on YouTube or on social media. So just give us an overview of the role of the insurance manager and how that differentiates Gibraltar, not from, I know many jurisdictions do have insurance management operations, but in the UK in particular, because that's our main market. So how does that sort of pan out?
Yeah, so I suppose everybody in the room probably understands the insurance manager model, but it's worth reiterating, I suppose. So it's different from what you're able to do in the UK. So yes, you can outsource services in the UK, but the insurance manager model is much deeper than that. They become sort of an extension of your business, or even part of your business, to help you through the whole life cycle, as Angelique mentioned. So from startup, you might start up as an MGA, take you through to being an insurer, and then even going into runoff. They can be with you throughout the whole of that life cycle. They might be providing services. So, finance, compliance, actuarial services, etc. But one of the key differentials, so you're not just outsourcing the service, individuals from your insurance manager can sit on your board. They can take regulated individual positions, so that might be head of compliance, actuarial, risk management. So we can be part of the solution for substance requirements that the regulator is going to demand of you if you're establishing in the territory, and that model is not used widely, certainly not in the UK. And it was great last year, even the regulator endorsed the insurance manager model by confirming that they could take the regulated individual positions.
And that was why during the 2000 to 2010, when the insurance market boomed in Gibraltar, the insurance manager model was the model that most insurers that they could rely on, and that attracted them. That's why we're 35 being authorized in that particular decade.
Yeah, and I think it still survives till this day. And there's a number of great advantages to insurers or MGAs. So the expertise that the insurance managers hold is incredible. So Artex itself, sort of in a version of itself, has been here for like 20 plus years. You look at the other insurance managers, lots of longevity, loads of great experience and expertise. So that can be applied into new applicants, and we can accelerate the startup process, and we can bring rigor to that process. As I mentioned before about the pre-application process for a new startup, we will have been through it several times before, so we know what the regulator needs, so we can speed that up. So you've got all of that expertise, and obviously all the other advisors as well in the room. But then, and also it can be a low-cost model as well. So when you're starting up, you don't need a full-time compliance individual. So you outsource that to an insurance manager, and you're only having part of the cost. And then you've got the flexibility as you go through your life cycle, your demands will change. So your insurance manager can very much dovetail with where you are. So in the end, yes, you might need a compliance individual. You might decide that you're going to take your finance in-house. And certainly what we do at Artex is your contracts are very flexible, so we can flex our services to match what your demands are. So I think there's all sorts of benefits which you have through that model.
So you'll evolve with your clients, and in some cases you'll say goodbye after a number of years because you've served the purpose, and others you'll be a very long-term relationship with them, but changing in terms of what you're providing on a yearly basis.
Correct, yeah. And I suppose from an insurance manager business model, we almost do ourselves out of a job, because you do a lot of work for a startup, and you hold people's hands, and then as they evolve and grow,
when they grow up,
they mature.
Sometimes they keep rebounding back.
I think possibly if you looked at that list of 35 that Yvonne brought up, I think the vast majority would have started with an insurance manager and had all moved on at different rates. And I mean, some still stay, and it's more likely to be the captives that stay simply because of the structure. But in most cases, at different points, they mature and set up their own infrastructures here. Yeah. So it's great to see so the maturing of the industry.
Quite. So with the potential for a new captive regime and hopefully a whole host of new of businesses coming and certainly looking at Gibraltar in the first place, but and then hopefully establishing. So that gives maybe some further opportunities for the insurance management sector. But do you think collectively you're doing enough to attract MGAs or to go out and promote Gibraltar to MGAs, or is there more work that collectively the Gibraltar and the industry should do to bring in more MGAs?
Yeah,
or try to bring in more MGAs?
I think there's always more that you can do, however successful it might be at the moment. I think there's always more that you can do. So personally, we're very involved with the MGAA in the UK. I think Mike Keating, who probably a lot of people will know in this room, has been to Gibraltar a few times in the past and is very supportive. Obviously, unfortunately, can't be here today. But I can see a lot more collaboration there. We just need to help other people to understand sort of the Rock's competitive advantage, in a way, which is why we're here today.
You did a great job, Mike. You did a great job in promoting Gibraltar all those years.
Angelique, anything further to add on insurance managers or?
I think. Well, I've already sort of talked them up, but I think it's a great place to start for new startups, because they have the systems, infrastructures, the knowledge, the expertise to allow, even if it's just for the in the application stage. I know we've discussed how the quality of the application is very important, and I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of companies have started with the insurance managers. And if we want to speed up the process, we need to make sure that we are providing quality to the regulator to allow them to make the right decisions, because ultimately they're looking after all our interests in sort of being the, you know, the filter for what insurance business comes to Gibraltar. And so that's very important. So yeah, it's highly recommended that you find people with the right expertise to help you through that process, to making sure that you're setting up something that's robust and will stand the test of time.
And hopefully with the new regime, if we're focusing on the core aspects which the regulator has to be completely satisfied with, if that's sort of front end loaded, then this whole process will allow us to, you know, as you've said, ensure that our speed to market is a competitive advantage and not a competitive, not say disadvantage, but it doesn't, you know, is a passive process rather than being a very active part of Gibraltar's attraction.
Yeah.
I think there's quite a number of parallels between a redomiciliation and a new startup. Of course, there's differences. The business is mature and operational, has lots of information. But I think the process that, as I've always been told by the regulators, the process they go through, there's lots of parallels. So we're going to sort of come to Clive now and just listen to his journey when they first thought about redomiciliation. I imagine that was all to do after the referendum in 2016, and how that process worked. And then what we'd also like to hear today is, you know, since you've been here now for nearly 4 years, so how is that, you know, that differences between, and you've touched a little bit on it already, but I think that would be really interesting for the audience to if you can share with us that journey.
If I go back a little bit further as to why we didn't come to Gibraltar in the first place.
Even better.
The reason we went to Malta was we were given a time period that was a lot shorter to have a license in Malta than it was in Gibraltar.
Even in 2006?
In 2006. We were up and running within 6 months, which, in due respect, Gibraltar couldn't do. And so that was the reason we originally started in Malta. And obviously, Brexit came along and we were unable to remain in Malta. And because of the arrangement, you can pick up your company from Malta and land it in Gibraltar. That is why Gibraltar was our place of choice then. Time wasn't so important because as we knew what time we were going to be having to leave, they were happy that it was the 30th of June 20. So we had about a run-in of 18 months to 2 years talking to the regulator and getting everything ready. The most important thing I have to say was we had very, very good professional advice. That was the crucial bit. We used Hassans, that's not why I'm saying it. But, and we were lucky in a respect that we also were already using Artex in Malta. So we didn't have to change our managers. Likewise, we were using GT as our auditors. And again, we didn't have to change that. So that was lucky in that respect. But the crucial thing we had was very good advice so that when we went to the presentation to the regulator, we had all the information they wanted, how it was placed, so to make their decision as easy as possible. It was a good job we did, because it did take a bit longer than we thought it was going to take. Maybe that was two reasons. Maybe the first one was that there was no time pressure put on it. So if there's no time pressure put on it, you tend to work into the time scales you've got. So we were we've been very, very happy here. I'm not going to criticise Malta, because if we weren't happy in Malta, we wouldn't have been there for 14 years. I think the services we get from Gibraltar are better, if nothing else, because we can talk to the regulator. That makes my job as the finance man a lot easier, because clearly I know what's going on. I go and see them on regular intervals. I try and make sure they don't have any surprises. We all had a surprise when Liz Truss had a budget that was fairly dramatic for all of us. But apart from that, it's been smooth sailing since been here. And I obviously, I don't know how people do when they set up from startup schemes, but we've found the transition easy. Nothing got in our way. Everybody tried to help it, make it as smooth as possible. And since we've been in Gibraltar, the business has flourished, and I'm sure that's half the reason.
Thank you very much. And you, as you said, you have now, unlike your time, you have regular meetings with the regulator where you can impart your thoughts and things, and they can. The
first 2.5 years we had one team. We've now changed to another team, but just getting used to them was obviously slightly different. But no, it's been. I can't say enough about the regulator. They've been more than accommodating. If we have any queries, phone call, I fly over, we have a meeting, and I fly back. It sounds grand, but it works.
Panel, anyone else that would like to add anything to what Clive's just said?
I think it goes back, your comment about Malta versus Gibraltar and your original choice goes back to a bit of a theme that seems to be coming out here, which is speed to market is critical.
Yeah,
and I think that's the challenge to our regulator. That we do need to. So even a 9 months for an MGA or 3 months for an MGA.
9 months for insurers.
Oh, we need to deliver on that as a regulator and as a So I think that's one of the challenges. Also, I suppose just reflecting on when we talk about captives, when we are talking about changing captive regimes, we need to make sure that we are competitive in a global market. So it's no good for us just to say, we think we've got a great proposition of our own. Actually, you need to compare ourselves against Guernsey, Bermuda, Cayman, Switzerland, France. The UK are talking about captives. We need to have a differentiation which really is very convincing and compelling. So it'd be interesting to get into Nigel's committee with the insurance managers to make sure that we can create that. So.
Thank you. Maybe move to the next question. Angelique, we've touched on some of it already, but just in terms of sort of business models and taxes and just operating, the operating aspects, is there anything else you'd just like to add on, what gives Gibraltar some of its competitive advantage in terms of how those businesses operate? And what Gibraltar has in terms of the differences between the UK. I mean, I think there was an announcement yesterday around some potential change to the tax regime for the insurance sector. So just give us a little bit more depth for the audience and for people who maybe will be joining us after the event.
Well, I think we can't. It's an obvious point that the tax is lower in Gibraltar compared to the UK. I mean, we're talking 12.5%, and there's also no capital duties, which will continue for now, and up to quite recently we had no tax on, or until the end of January, we have no tax on interest income. But there is still, those advantages still remain from a cost perspective, is the lower taxes. I mean, a lot of companies have, during the last few years with COVID, it hasn't been the plain sailing for these companies. So, they now have this new interest income that's coming through, which will have to be factored into pricing, etc. So yeah, there are some of those benefits, but I don't necessarily think that is the only benefit. I think is also the whole cost structure and the efficiency around working in Gibraltar, which I think also works in their favor and is one of the reasons why these companies continue to trade from Gibraltar.
Because corporate tax in the UK is now 25%. So even 12.5% is a considerable saving in the UK.
I mean, it's likely all to be moving towards the 15% mark at some point. That seems to be the minimum.
I think Nigel announced yesterday that there will be tax. There will be on insurers and DLT providers.
A tax increase, yes.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that anyone else would like to add? And then I think maybe we'll just open the session to the audience, and anyone who's got any questions in the audience, then the panel will be delighted to answer it or at least respond.
Delighted.
Yeah, it's a big word.
There's a question at the back.
for you. Let me squeeze through.
Hi, Nick Hodgett from Artex. It's sort of already been mentioned, but the GFSC requires a majority of function holders to be Gibraltar-based, and it's already been acknowledged that there's maybe not the necessary pool of resources to support startups and future growth. What can be done in the short to medium term to maybe stop this becoming a barrier?
So, panel, do we think the current sort of resource, human resource for the insurance sector, is that an inhibitor to future growth in Gibraltar?
That is a challenge. That is a challenge that, you know, we need to face, not only for insurance, for other sectors as well.
Yeah, I think some of the new organisations that we're talking to are saying they recognise that they need feet on the ground, and they are planning to bring that talent with them, because they recognise that in Gibraltar we might not have enough people to fulfil the regulated functions, etc., etc. I think maybe in the past some of the companies that have been here have not sort of committed to that, and I know the big theme from Nigel is he wants to earn taxes from people that are working in Gibraltar, you know, as well as businesses being based here. So I think there's going to be a bit of a trend there, and that's a duty, I suppose, on us as advisors to help people right at the outset to say, are you going to have feet on the ground? I think it's great that we're trying to talk about talented Gibraltarians and the youth and bringing them through, but that's going to take a long, long time. I suppose, from my perspective, it strengthens the insurance manager model, because we've got the people that can, you know, take a lot of those regulated individual positions and create substance.
Yeah.
But again, I suppose as the demand grows, we'll have issues around resource.
Maybe the old adage of supply and demand will work. If demand goes up, supply might meet it eventually.
Yes.
So it might if there's more jobs available, it might attract more people here. But obviously you've got to get the independent non-executive directors over here.
Yeah.
And if we sort of turn it on its head and maybe say, look, we have an online gambling sector here which employs over 3,000 people, and most of the senior management of all of those businesses, which are, you know, world-class businesses, they're based in Gibraltar. So maybe we just done ourselves a slight disservice in not promoting Gibraltar, or maybe not, you know, pushing a little bit more about, you know, the quality of life in Gibraltar. I think a treaty would obviously make a big difference in terms of, you know, fluidity at the border and people living in Spain and coming into work. But you know, if that sector can employ all of those people, then surely we just need to go back out and just sell harder, you know, the attraction of Gibraltar, and say, look, we have to find those people who are going to come across and mentor and support younger people as well. But there's a job in hand, I think, to just, and maybe that's, you know, as the insurance managers expanding further in the future. But it seems to me that if the online gambling sector can employ that many people, that maybe as a community, we've just got to do more to encourage people to look at Gibraltar as and maybe it's an age thing as well. Maybe people that have spent 20 years in the city, they actually look for something different. I mean, Mike, you know, after 30 years in the sector, you came out here and obviously didn't have any particular sort of inhibitions about moving and setting up here for the next stage of your career.
I was based in Yorkshire back in the UK, so the weather is definitely nice here. I mean, yeah, there's no doubt in the lifestyle here is significantly better, but that's not just the weather, that's the culture of the people. It's a very multicultural, diverse community that we've got here, and I get a lot of enrichment out of that. In our team, we've got like 8 or 9 different nationalities within a relatively small team of 20 people, and that brings with it a load of enrichment.
And I know others where, you know, sorry, Clive, I'll let you. I know others where, you know, the majority of the workforce now are no longer sort of Gibraltar or UK passport holders, citizens. So again, I think that looking wider afield as well, particularly with EU nationals who can, you know, live in Spain without any problems and then, you know, cross on a daily basis if that's what they choose to do, means that there's, you know, opportunities, I think, to expand our outlook on who is potential talent to support a growing and diversifying sector. Clive, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think if Nigel gets Gibraltar removed off the grey market, that'll help the grey list. Because if you're in the finance business and you want to move to the from, say, the UK, you might think, do you want to move to a country that is on the grey list still? I don't know. It might impact on people's thoughts.
Thank you. Any further questions from the audience? Anyone else like to raise anything?
Thanks, Denise. So I realise I'm mistress of ceremonies, but I also do have a question. You talked a lot about speed to market and the need for quick decision makings when people are setting up here. What about once you're actually set up? There are decisions that are needed, particularly with the Section 83A in the Gibraltar legislation. Do you have a view on how that should work once people are up and running?
Angelique, maybe could you like to respond initially?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge that these are live businesses, and while they have to fit within regulation, and it's important that they, that they keep to what needs to be done. Business moves really fast, and therefore we need to ensure that the regulator is supportive of that, and the decisions and the feedback is timely to allow those businesses to make the right decisions. And I think that's what the question is sort of directed at, I think. Yeah, exactly. So it's not just getting the businesses here, it's just making sure there's an environment where they can thrive within the confinements of the regulation. And part of that is the turnaround time with communication with the regulator.
I mean, and those requirements and that legislation is fairly new, and so I think maybe there's in the sector there's I think is this something that is an event that we need to advise the regulator, or does everyone then think, well, look, to be on the safe side, we're going to
do everything.
We're going to do everything. So, Yvonne, how does that evolve, and how does this sort of settle down so it really works for both the insurance entities, but also for the regulator?
Yeah. I think the provision in itself was so widely drafted, and that is why it's causing so much confusion and consternation amongst the sector, because of the fact that it was so widely drafted. But I think they wanted to catch everything, and obviously it stemmed from the fact of the core 12 principle, where you have to notify the regulator of anything you think that they should receive notice on. But where do we draw the line? So it is a difficult decision. I think a lot of firms do not want to breach any of the provisions. So, they want to comply, but there perhaps could be a better way of doing this, because they don't mind notifying the regulator when there's any material change to their business plan, financial resources, or to their corporate management. Perhaps the law could be changed to say notification for a certain period, and then if there's no objection notice, then you can proceed. So that might, quicken the process, something that would be acceptable to all. But as it stands now, it says prior approval. So therefore, all businesses kind of stop. We cannot do anything.
It's not feasible for businesses to stop.
So, Clive, as an operator, how have you found it?
Well, we've been asked whether we were going to do a new 83A. I think the regulator has to be certainly sympathetic to the fact, because of the costs going up, repair costs in the UK have risen substantially, so rates have got to increase. Now, when we prepared our budget for March, the year end March 24, about this time last year, we weren't aware of such increase was going to be in the marketplace. Hire of cars is much more expensive. Everything's more expensive. So our rates have gone up to reflect that. It doesn't mean to say we're doing any more business. It's not as though we're buying in business. We've just had rate increase.
So your live customer sort of
policies so our policy number won't necessarily increase, but our gross written premium might go up by 30%. So I don't think that requires a new 83A, because we haven't changed our business at all.
So in that sense, you're taking a pragmatic approach to this, but are you, just to be safe, are you still notifying
we're telling them.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and see them in a couple of weeks' time when we've got our figures for 9 months. But hopefully we're that close to our year end, which is March, and we're now doing the budget for the next year's, and that's far more important, our budget for the next year, than result than the extra turnover gross written premium for this year, I believe. But we'll see what they say.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
but
think
they
we're-
did come up with a guidance note that if the board of directors think it is not an 83A and a reason thought out debate as to why it's not 83A and get it minuted,
Yeah, we did.
then they say
Yeah.
even though they disagree, they will not issue any
Okay.
penalties.
Okay, well, we did that at our last board meeting, so maybe you advised us, Yvonne.
Catherine, has that answered your question? We've got about 30 seconds, I think, and then our time is up. So, anything else? That just leaves me to say thank you very much to the panel, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.